Unaware she just married a billionaire's son who controls his entire empire, Emma felt the cold mud hit her pregnant stomach before she saw his face. That same face that once whispered, "I love you," in a hospital room where their daughter died in her arms. That same face that turned away when she screamed for him to hold their baby just once. That same face now laughing as filthy water soaked through her clothes, freezing against the belly where a miracle she was told would never happen was growing. Richard leaned out, his face twisted with disgust. Still living like the poor, barren failure I left behind? Look at you, Emma. Shopping at Tesco like some desperate woman who couldn't keep a man. His eyes dropped to her stomach with pure contempt. And you actually found someone stupid enough to get you pregnant? We both know your useless body can't carry a child. You'll kill this one too, just like you killed ours. Emma's hands shook as muddy water dripped down her face, mixing with tears she refused to let him see, her mind flashing back to the hospital room where she lost their daughter, while Richard chose a business meeting over holding her hand, to the divorce papers where he told everyone she was a cheater who destroyed their marriage, to the doctors who said the trauma had left her barren. But Richard Blackwell has no idea that the woman he just humiliated, the ex-wife he calls poor, barren, and worthless, is now Emma Sterling, married to Alexander Sterling, the billionaire's son who controls the $12 billion empire that holds every contract keeping Richard's business alive. He has no idea that in 3 weeks, when his father Lawrence Sterling announces on live television that Emma is pregnant with his heir, Richard won't just lose his empire. He'll be destroyed on national television, begging for forgiveness while the world watches. But here's what will break your heart. Why did Richard really splash mud on his ex-wife? What did Emma endure in that marriage that made her believe she deserved to be treated like trash? And how did the announcement that she's pregnant with a billionaire's heir leave Richard so completely destroyed he lost everything in 72 hours? Stay with me, because what happens next will prove that karma doesn't just come for cruel men. It arrives in a billionaire's limousine with receipts, and the revenge is so perfectly calculated it will leave you speechless. 6 years ago, Emma made a choice that would cost her everything she thought love was supposed to be. She was 22, standing in a registry office wearing a simple white dress her mother had sewn by hand, watching Richard Blackwell slide a gold ring onto her finger. He was 28, confident, magnetic, the kind of man who made you feel like the only person in the room. "You're mine now," he whispered against her ear, and Emma thought it sounded romantic. She didn't know yet that he meant it like ownership. Richard was building something, an empire, he called it. Blackwell Estates, luxury properties across London, shopping centers, office buildings, apartments that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. And Emma was proud of him. She taught Year 2 students at a primary school in Hackney, made £32,000 a year, came home every evening to a man who was becoming a king. The first year was beautiful. Richard bought her things she never asked for, designer dresses, expensive perfume, jewelry that felt too heavy on her skin. He took her to restaurants where she didn't recognize half the words on the menu. He introduced her to business partners as "my wife, the teacher," and Emma thought he was proud. She didn't hear the dismissiveness in his tone. She didn't see the way his colleagues smiled, polite, but pitying. By the second year, the cracks started showing. Richard began commenting on her clothes. "You're a Blackwell now, Emma. You can't wear Primark to dinner parties." He bought her new wardrobes without asking what she liked. He scheduled her hair appointments without telling her. He controlled her like she was another property he was developing. Emma told herself it was love, that he just wanted her to fit into his world, that she needed to try harder. The third year, she got pregnant. Emma cried when she saw the positive test. Happy tears. She imagined a little girl with Richard's dark hair and her green eyes. They'd name her Sophie. Richard seemed excited too at first. He told his board members, sent out cigars, posted about it on social media like it was a business achievement. But then the pregnancy became inconvenient. Emma had morning sickness that lasted all day. She was exhausted. She couldn't attend events. Richard grew frustrated. "You need to push through it, Emma. I have investors to impress." At 6 months pregnant, Emma was at school, reading to her students, when she felt the cramping. Sharp, violent, wrong. She called Richard 17 times. He was in a meeting closing a £20 million deal. A parent drove Emma to the hospital. The doctors tried everything, but baby Sophie was born silent, 6 months old, perfectly formed. Gone. Emma held her daughter's tiny body, screaming for Richard to come, to see her, to hold their baby just once. He arrived 8 hours later, still in his suit, smelling like whiskey and cologne. He stood at the foot of the hospital bed, uncomfortable, checking his phone. The doctor said these things happen, he said, like he was discussing a failed property inspection. We can try again. Emma looked at him holding their dead daughter and felt something inside her die that wasn't the baby. The doctor came in later, after Richard had left to handle some calls. The news was worse than losing Sophie. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm very sorry. There were complications, the stress, the trauma. Your uterus sustained significant damage. Your chances of carrying another pregnancy to term are extremely low. We estimate 5 to 8%. Emma was 26 years old, lying in a hospital bed, being told she was broken. When she told Richard, his response was 5 words. So you're basically barren. Not, I'm sorry, not, we'll figure it out. Just that word. Barren. Like she was dead soil, worthless land, a failed investment. And from that moment on, Richard used it like a weapon. At dinner parties when people asked about children, we'd love to, but Emma has complications. Said with just enough emphasis to make it sound like a character flaw. During arguments, maybe if you could give me a family, I'd have a reason to come home. To justify his affairs, I'm 31 years old, I need an heir. You can't give me that. Emma spent the next 3 years as a ghost in her own marriage. She went to therapy twice a week, took medication for depression, taught her students during the day, and came home to a man who looked at her like she'd failed him. Richard's affairs became obvious. Late nights, lipstick on collars, perfume that wasn't hers. A woman named Vanessa started appearing at company events as his executive assistant. Everyone knew. Emma knew. But she stayed. Because some part of her believed Richard was right, that she was broken, that no one else would want her, that she deserved this. Until the night she came home early from a school event and found Richard in their bed with Vanessa, both naked, both laughing. Richard saw Emma standing in the doorway, and he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He sat up completely casual, like she'd interrupted a business meeting. Maybe if you were more exciting, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere, he said. And maybe if you weren't barren, I'd have a reason to stay faithful. Emma packed a bag that night. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely zip it. She filed for divorce the next morning. Richard didn't fight it. Good, he said. I need someone who can actually give me a legacy. But Richard didn't just let her go quietly. He told everyone, their friends, his business partners, their families, that Emma was the one who cheated, that she destroyed their marriage, that she was unstable, broken, couldn't be trusted. He painted himself as the victim and Emma as the villain. And for 11 months after the divorce, Emma believed him. Emma was living in a tiny flat in Brixton, barely big enough for a bed and a desk, teaching full-time and going to therapy every Wednesday evening, when her friend Sarah dragged her to a charity event. You need to get out, Sarah insisted. Meet people. You love books. This is a children's literacy gala. It's perfect for you. Emma almost said no. She'd spent 11 months rebuilding herself piece by piece, and the thought of being in a room full of strangers felt exhausting. But something made her say yes. Maybe it was the part of her that refused to let Richard's voice win. Maybe it was the teacher in her who couldn't resist anything involving children and books. She wore a simple navy dress, the first dress she'd bought for herself in years. No one chose it for her. No one told her it wasn't good enough. It was hers. The gala was at a beautiful venue in Kensington, all soft lighting and elegant decorations, but Emma felt out of place immediately. Everyone looked expensive, important, like they belonged in rooms like this. She was about to leave when she saw a man in a plain dark suit setting up chairs near the back. He wasn't barking orders at staff or checking his phone. He was just helping. Emma walked over. Do you need a hand? The man looked up and smiled. Genuine, warm, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. I'd love one, actually. I'm terrible at making these rows straight. They worked in silence for a few minutes, arranging chairs, and then he said, I'm Alexander, by the way. Emma. So, Emma, what brings you here tonight? She expected the usual small talk. What do you do? Where do you live? All the questions that felt like social auditions. But Alexander didn't ask any of that. Instead, he said, What's your favorite children's book? And just like that, they spent 2 hours talking about books, about teaching, about the magic of watching a child read their first full sentence, about how stories could save people. Alexander listened like her words mattered, like she mattered. Not because of who she was married to or how much money she made or whether she could give him something, just because of who she was. When he asked for her number, Emma hesitated. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, a habit she'd developed after the miscarriage, like she was protecting a wound that never healed. I'm not really ready for coffee, Alexander interrupted gently. Just coffee. As friends who both think the Gruffalo is criminally underrated as literature. Emma laughed, really laughed. For the first time in over a year. They met for coffee 3 days later, then dinner, then long walks through Hyde Park where Alexander talked about his work in family business operations, but never elaborated. Emma assumed he worked for some corporate firm. She didn't care. He was kind, patient. He never pushed, never demanded. When Emma told him about her divorce, Alexander didn't ask for details. When she cried telling him about Sophie, about the miscarriage, about being told she was barren, Alexander held her hand across the table and said nothing. Because nothing needed to be said. 4 months into dating, Alexander took Emma to meet his father. There's something I need to tell you first, he said, and Emma's stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. He's married. He's moving. He doesn't want this anymore. My last name is Sterling, Alexander said quietly. Emma blinked. Okay? Alexander Sterling. My father is Lawrence Sterling. The name hit Emma like cold water. Lawrence Sterling. The Lawrence Sterling. Billionaire. Owner of Sterling Global Holdings. 12 billion pounds. Buildings across London with his name on them. Government contracts. Media holdings. One of the most powerful men in Britain. Emma stood up so fast she almost knocked over her chair. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to know me. Not my last name. Not my father's money. Alexander's voice cracked. Does that change things? Emma thought about Richard, who led with his money, his status, his achievements. Who made sure everyone knew exactly how successful he was. Then she looked at Alexander, who'd spent 4 months helping her arrange chairs, talking about children's books, holding her when she cried, never once mentioning that his family controlled an empire. No, she said, it doesn't change anything. They were engaged 3 months later. The wedding was small, 40 people, mostly family. Emma wore a dress she chose herself. Lawrence Sterling insisted on walking her down the aisle because her father had died when she was 19. You're my daughter now, Lawrence said, his voice thick with emotion. Not my daughter-in-law, my daughter. Richard Blackwell never knew it happened. Emma had blocked him on everything, moved on completely. When Emma became Emma Sterling, her life transformed overnight. Security details. Media attention. Events at Buckingham Palace. But Emma didn't change. She kept teaching, kept volunteering. The Year 2 students at her school in Hackney didn't care that their teacher was now married to a billionaire's son. They just cared that Mrs. Sterling always had the best stories and gave the best hugs. 3 months into the marriage, Emma felt nauseous during a morning assembly. She excused herself, went to the staff bathroom, and took a pregnancy test she'd been carrying in her bag for a week, too terrified to use. 2 lines. Positive. Emma's hands shook so violently she dropped the test. She slid down the bathroom wall and cried. Not from joy, not yet. From terror. Because the doctors had told her this would never happen. Because she'd been told her body was too broken, too damaged, too traumatized to carry life. Because some part of her still believed Richard's voice. You'll kill this one too. She called Alexander from the bathroom floor. I need you to come get me. 20 minutes later, Alexander was there. Emma showed him the test, unable to speak. Alexander's face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. Shock, fear, hope, determination, before settling on something fierce and protective. He knelt on the bathroom floor and took Emma's face in his hands. "We're going to do this together. Every appointment, every moment, every fear. You're not alone." At 4 months, the doctors confirmed it. The pregnancy was healthy, stable, miraculous, one doctor said. At 5 months, Emma's bump started showing. She told her year 2 class she was going to be a mummy. They made her cards covered in glitter and misspelled words. Emma cried happy tears. Lawrence Sterling was beside himself with joy, his first grandchild, an heir to everything he'd built. He threw a small family dinner to celebrate, and when he toasted Emma, he said something that made her cry all over again. "You've given this family something we didn't know we were missing. Not an heir, not a legacy, but hope. You've shown us that broken things can heal, that love is stronger than pain, that the best things in life aren't bought. They're built by people who refuse to give up." Emma was 5 months pregnant, glowing with a happiness she thought she'd never feel when she decided to visit her mother in her old neighborhood. She needed to pick up some things: chocolate digestives, oranges. The cravings were getting specific. She stopped at Tesco, the same one she'd shopped at for years. Wore comfortable maternity jeans and a loose sweater, hair in a messy bun, no makeup, no security detail for once. She'd convinced Alexander she just needed an hour to feel normal. She was crossing the street, grocery bags in hand, one hand protectively on her bump, when she heard the engine rev. A black Bentley Continental GT accelerated toward a massive puddle right beside her. Emma barely had time to process it before the impact. A tsunami of muddy water, freezing cold, violent, exploding over her body. It soaked her from head to toe, covered her face, drenched her pregnant belly, ruined her groceries. Emma stood there, dripping, shocked, her hands instinctively covering her stomach. The Bentley stopped. The window rolled down, and Emma saw him, Richard, that face, those eyes. That smile she used to think was charming but now recognized as cruel. "Oh my God. Emma? Is that you?" Richard's voice was pure delight, pure victory. He was laughing. Actually laughing. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, designer sunglasses, designer purse, designer cruelty. She giggled. "Richard, you're terrible. Is that really your ex-wife?" "In the flesh," Richard said, looking Emma up and down like she was roadkill. "Still shopping at Tesco, still living that budget life. Some things never change, huh?" Emma couldn't speak, couldn't move. She just stood there, 5 months pregnant, covered in filthy water, staring at the man who'd destroyed her. Richard's eyes landed on her stomach. His smile widened, sharp, vindictive. "Wait, are you pregnant?" Emma's hands shook. She said nothing. Richard's laughter turned vicious. "Oh my God. Vanessa, look, some desperate fool actually knocked up my barren ex-wife." He leaned further out the window, his voice dropping to something designed to hurt. "We both know your useless body can't carry a child, Emma. You'll kill this one too, just like you killed ours. What idiot agreed to get you pregnant? Does he know you're defective?" The words hit Emma like physical blows. Her vision blurred. Not from the muddy water. From the memories flooding back. The hospital room. Sophie's tiny body. Richard's voice saying, "These things happen." The doctors saying, "Barren." The years of believing she deserved this. Richard revved his engine. "You know, I always wondered what happened to you after the divorce. Guess you're still exactly where I left you. Struggling through life, poor and pathetic, pretending you're not broken." Vanessa's laughter mixed with the sound of rain. "Richard, she looks miserable enough already." "Does she?" Richard grinned wider. "I think she looks exactly like what she is. Ordinary. A failure. A woman nobody wanted until some desperate man settled." He caught Emma's eyes one last time. "Good luck keeping that baby alive, Emma. We both know how that story ends." The Bentley sped off, engine roaring, leaving Emma standing in a puddle of filthy water, groceries destroyed, dignity shattered. 5 months pregnant and covered in mud that smelled like sewage and oil and rot. People on the street stared. Some looked concerned. Some uncomfortable. One teenager had their phone out, filming. Emma's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. The screen was wet. Her fingers left muddy prints. She dialed Alexander's number. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, love, can you pick me up?" Emma's voice cracked. Something happened. 20 minutes later, a black Range Rover with government plates pulled up. 2 security personnel stepped out first, scanning the area like they were protecting royalty. Then Alexander emerged. The moment he saw Emma, covered in mud, shaking, crying, hands protectively on her pregnant stomach, his face went from concern to something cold and lethal. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders and Emma told him everything. Every word, every laugh. The comment about killing this baby too. Alexander's jaw clenched so tightly Emma could hear his teeth grind. His hands were gentle on her face, but his eyes were murder. "Do you know who did this?" "My ex-husband, Richard Blackwell." Alexander helped her into the car and spoke quietly to his security team. "Get me everything on Richard Blackwell. Everything. Business holdings, contracts, debts, partners, affairs, and find that video." Within 2 hours, the video had gone viral. Billionaire splashes mud on pregnant woman. 15 million views. The comments were vicious. "Who does this to a pregnant woman? That's someone's wife. This man is a psychopath." Then someone recognized Emma from a charity event photo. Wait, that's Emma Sterling, the Prime Minister's daughter-in-law. The story detonated across every news outlet in Britain. Billionaire property developer humiliates Prime Minister's pregnant daughter-in-law. Richard's phone exploded with calls. His PR team, his lawyers, his board members, all panicking. By the next morning, Richard received a call he'd never forget. The Cabinet Office, not a request, a command. All government contracts under immediate review. Ethics violations. £340 million frozen. Richard tried calling his government contacts. No one answered. What Richard didn't know, Lawrence Sterling had made 3 phone calls. That's all it took. Within 48 hours, 3 major banks called in £60 million in loans. Richard's stock crashed 53% in one day. His board voted him out as CEO. But the real destruction came 3 weeks later. Lawrence Sterling stood before 200 of Britain's most powerful people at a charity gala broadcast live on BBC One. Emma stood beside Alexander, glowing in an emerald gown that perfectly showed her 6-month bump. "Tonight," Lawrence said, his voice filling the room, "I'm honored to announce that my daughter-in-law Emma is carrying my first grandchild, the heir to the Sterling family legacy." The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. But Lawrence wasn't finished. "This child represents everything my family values: compassion, integrity, respect. Which is why I want to be clear. Anyone who disrespects my family, who would harm my daughter or endanger her child, will face the full consequences of their actions." Everyone in the room knew exactly who he was talking about. 8 million viewers watched it live. Richard sat alone in his half-empty Mayfair flat, soon to be seized by banks, and watched Emma, his ex-wife, the woman he called barren and worthless, standing in a room filled with the most powerful people in Britain, carrying the Sterling heir, loved and protected and radiant. All his government contracts were terminated permanently. Vanessa left him for a hedge fund manager. His company was sold. Richard Blackwell, once worth £47 million, now works as a consultant making £65,000 a year, living in a modest flat in South London, while Emma Sterling became Britain's most beloved figure, a teacher who married into power but stayed humble, whose charity work transformed thousands of lives, whose son James Lawrence Sterling was born healthy and perfect 3 months later. Richard didn't just lose Emma. He lost everything. And Emma didn't need revenge. She just needed to survive long enough to watch karma arrive in a billionaire's limousage. The Bible says in Galatians 6:7, "Do not be deceived, God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." Richard sowed cruelty and reaped destruction. Emma sowed humility and reaped a kingdom. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss stories that remind us that character, not wealth, determines our destiny. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and share this with someone who needs to remember that broken things can heal, and that sometimes the best revenge is just living well. God bless you.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment, every detail in the story has brought you emotions, thoughts, and maybe a little joy or motivation. Thank you for spending time with us, and hope that the next stories will continue to accompany you and touch your heart.